Yes. All right.
Okay.
We can end the show now. I mean, we're pretty much done.
Hello and welcome to our fifth trip to the Rose and Rockstar from the Rockstar CMO effing Marketing Podcast and the Marketing Podcast Network. It's Saturday the 15th of February and I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO. In a moment, I'll join my chum, author, marketing strategy expert and chief troublemaker at 7th Bear, Robert Rose, in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar, where he recommends one of his fabulous cocktails and I pick his brains on a marketing topic that is top of mind for me, or maybe, as we get into this, something suggested by you. This week, I'm inspired by a chat over a nice lunch the other day where I was asked a big question about marketing that I thought I'd share with you and get Robert's thoughts. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the weekend here. It is raining, which I know is Tuesday for you, but it is wonderful here to get some rain, taking a little bit of the crispiness out of the Southern California and adding. So, and it's also a long weekend here. We have what you would call a bank holiday, which here in America is basically called a holiday for some and a holiday not for others, depending on where you lie in the ecosystem of the weirdness that is now the United States of America. And so, I'm looking forward to a long weekend as well.
Nice. Well, you'd think there'd be an executive mandate for President's Day.
Well, I'm just surprised it hasn't been renamed Trump's Day, or Red, White, and Blue Day.
And you must all go to Trump Bay and overlook Trump Sea.
Mar-a-Lago Day or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Now, we promised ourselves we wouldn't do this.
I promise nothing anymore. When it comes to this stuff, we have reached such peak ridiculousness. I cannot abide. Right. So it's just, we have reached a point where I just can't keep my mouth shut anymore. It's just, and it's not even the politics, right? It's the ridiculousness. I mean, I can abide it's like, I can abide the right wing politics to a certain degree, but the absolute stupidity is really hard to overlook.
Well, he plays the common man very well. I don't know.
Yeah, indeed.
I don't want to make this any worse. What is it? We're having a nice time in the bar. What cocktail are you going to suggest that would go along with a nice long weekend to celebrate?
I
your
think we're
Preston?
going to go, I think we have to tonight just have a classic. I have been in the mood all week for a classic Negroni.
Nice.
And I know we've had the Negroni on the show before.
We had grapefruit.
Yeah, well, in varying degrees as well, right? We've had different flavors of Negroni. We've had specialty with all kinds of different ways of making the Negroni. But tonight we're going to go with just a very, very, very a classic Negroni. Gin, vermouth, a little Campari, and maybe a little bit of an orange to set it all off, and it's just the classic, right? And
nice.
It's good for Italian food, and good way to sort of end the week.
Nice. Yes, I think that it was last week or the week before I shared that I've got a friend who very much enjoys a Negroni, and it was the kickoff for a very fine afternoon with him. But I won't delve into that story. We shall just sip these Negronis. And this week, mate, I've got a really big question for you as we get into the bar here. And it came from via our mutual chum who I had lunch with on Monday. I'm not sure whether I should be revealing that Kathy was in the UK, but Kathy McKnight was here and we had lunch and with Theresa Wrigley. And the question around our lunch table was, is the job of marketing getting harder? Or at least that was a question they asked me at some point. And I thought, well, who better to ask that question than you, Mr. Rose? So is the job of marketing getting harder, mate?
Yes. All right.
Oh,
we can end the show now. We're pretty much done. Yes, it is. It is getting harder. And I think the real, it's when we think about marketing, full stop, as I've often said and I've been a student for 35 years now. It is, as I've said to many of my clients who find themselves either as business owners or entrepreneurs or whatever, and don't have a classic understanding of the sort of classic points of marketing or the frameworks or how it works or anything like that. As I've said many times, it's a large and shallow ocean. It's not terribly hard to understand any part of it. It's not that deep, but there's just a lot of it, right? Yeah. And I think in many ways it has gotten similarly larger, but no deeper, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's the hard part is just honestly keeping up with all of the varying degrees of ways of, because marketing at its core is a very simple proposition. Yeah. It is simply reaching people who we want to reach and convincing them to do something that we want them to do. And that's kind of the end of it, right? And and I guess I would add one line, which is, and have them feel happy about doing it. And so when you start thinking about all of the different ways that you can do that, have to do that, have to navigate around competition, the noise, all of that stuff, those are the things that make it truly difficult or more difficult than it was. I mean, you just didn't have that many options back before the internet, and then, in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't that many ways to get your message out. It was basically TV, radio, print, and fax machine. And it wasn't until really digital came along when we started redefining what media meant. And which redefines what our classic, going back to our Kotler, going back to the classic marketing mix. There's a wonderful line. I'm a collector of first editions of classic marketing texts.
Oh, cool.
And one of the marketing books that I have is the first one where the 4 Ps were mentioned, right? And they're in it talking about the marketing mix. And the whole introduction to that book is defining what they mean by marketing mix. And the metaphor, and this is really true, and people don't tend to believe this, but it's really true. The metaphor that they use to explain the 4 Ps and what the marketing mix is basically a bartender. They say, your favorite bartender mixes up ingredients to make the same kinds of drinks that, they make across the street and across, the world. But every bartender has their own sort of way of doing it. And so that that is basically the marketing mix. How you mix up the things that you put into your messaging and the distribution of that messaging is what differentiates you into the world. And it's still true today. It's just there's way more ingredients to think about.
Yeah. So, and there's a man after our own heart who's telling stories using cocktails, but also,
indeed.
And you collecting first edition marketing books does not surprise me one bit with you being the student that you are. I think that's fantastic. So, but when we have that, when I was asked the question, is the job of marketing getting harder? Do you think it's aside from the additional channels that we've just shared, yes, it's much harder than it was, say, like 20 or 30 years ago. Do you think it's any harder the last 5 years, the more recent times? It does seem to be, the suggestion I got from the question was that, is it harder this year almost? Because we're seeing so much change, we're seeing AI come through and all that kind of good stuff. Do you think it's potentially getting harder and that hardness is getting faster, or how do you feel like about 2025 marketing in 2025?
I think it's a great question, and I think what I would say is that relative to the trend, the sort of, so I'm not a statistics guy. Like, I failed statistics in college, so the people will check my math here and my sort of usage of the word statistics when I'm thinking of this, but when I look at the longer, broader trend, like, you look at a trend of the stock market, for example, or you look at the 50-year version of the stock market versus the 3-month version of the stock market, and I look at the relative difficulty when you say, is it harder this year than it was last year? I think the answer to that is no. Right. If you looked at it at that level, right, sort of at that, what's the famous mathematician, how long is the coastline of Britain kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, I've failed all of that myself as well.
Yeah, it's fractal math and Mandelbrot and something. But basically it's looking at it, when you look at it close up like that, I don't think it's going to be exponentially harder this year than it was last, or exponentially harder than it was in 2021 or 2020 or 2019. Right. The conditions on the ground change, the economy changes, but that goes up and down. It comes back and forth. But I think if you look at the longer term, like, is that line continuing to go up? In other words, it's not getting any easier long term to do marketing than it was 50 years ago. Then yes, I think that line continues to go up, and I think it continues to make an argument, for forever. My sort of BHAG, my big, hairy, audacious goal for marketing as a marketing guy is to elevate the practice of marketing to that which is considered equivalent to a lawyer or doctor or any other profession where an advanced knowledge of a particular skill set is considered, an honored profession. And I think marketing has been already there for many years. And I think it continues to be that because it is a highly specialized, it requires high levels of skills. Again, not necessarily deep levels of skills, but a very wide ranging levels of skills as it pertains to science, art, data, creativity. It is such a magic alchemy of everything that we have to do as creative and business professionals that it is just exceedingly hard.
Yeah, and I love that magic alchemy. And it's also something that everybody needs to consider, right? We're all marketing nowadays with social media and our personal brands and all that kind of stuff. But it also gives everybody, do you think it's getting any harder because everybody's got an opinion about marketing? And we're always talking about this, right? Everybody is suggesting that we do more cowbell, more video, make the logo bigger. We should be on tick face, whatever it is. We're inundated with suggestions in the marketing team. Do you think that's making life a little harder?
100%. Yes. I mean, I think in many ways, you know, so I would point to two things. One is, which has always been there, which is the nature of, which has been, by the way, the case since marketing began. I mean, even going back and looking at our marketing history, right? So you go all the way back to when marketing started to become an actual term. And part of that was, you know, not to get too professorial here, but in the very early days of what became known as the practice of marketing, it was ostensibly farmers wanted to bring their crops or cattle to the marketplace, and intermediaries would step in and say, basically, I can help you get into the right markets. I can help you I can help you price these things. I can help you understand, because you're just a dumb farmer. You don't know, right? And so these marketers were called, and this is the origin of the term, middleman. And so they were literally the middlemen between the producer of the product, which in many cases was farm or cattle or you know, basically commodities, oil, etc., and the marketplace, where they would actually openly sell these things. And these middlemen would actually help them do it. And it was always the case that both sides of that equation, right, the market owners as well as the business, the farmers, the producers of the product, always questioned the value of the middleman. They always sort of said, I don't know why I need these people and I have to pay these people, because I know this, right? I know this better than anybody. And that sentiment has, you know, for the last 150 years has been common, where it's easy to throw darts and have opinions and, you know, say things from the cheap seats of the CEO seat, to say things like, you know, marketers are, you know, all they care about is colors and brand and stuff. They don't really care about selling business. And, you know, and we've always had that critique. Yeah. So that hasn't gotten any easier or harder. It's just always been there because people think it's easy. I mean, people think it's an easy thing to do. It's just picking the right picture and the right message and away you go. The second thing I would note, and I think this is some of the side effect of the internet in general, is that the younger generation doesn't appreciate, and I don't mean to sound like an old man yelling at clouds here, the younger people just don't appreciate that I had to walk a mile to school. But in many ways, there are so many quote unquote marketing theories coming out, you know, so many of these new frameworks, new ideas, and you look at them as, you know, as having some experience and some appreciation for what came before you. And you go, yeah, we've been talking about that for 100 years. You know, I mean, but you get so wrapped around the axle that it sounds new and it sounds, weird and out of the box, that people start going down the road of that and you know, and not understanding where the pitfalls are over it, you know, and sort of having to relearn stuff that we've learned for 100 years simply because they didn't take the time to go research the thing and figure out that it, you know. Yes, we were doing that in the 1980s, and it didn't, and it didn't help, or it did help, right? You know, either way.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I did with the question when I was asked it over lunch. I was trying to sort of split it up, which is like, well, operationally, doing marketing has definitely got harder, I think, because of some of these external forces of what's going on. But I really like what you were saying there about the it's a large shallow ocean that's just getting wider and wider. There's so much more that we need to just learn about, consider, and do, isn't there? And yet executing against that massive ocean is getting harder internally. And I don't, and
Indeed.
also, and you know, it's widely reported that people aren't given the time. And one of the things I think is interesting here is listen to you talking about the history of marketing and the old days when we had channels. Very little that wasn't particularly measurable, right? And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? Because I think we're moving out of the period where everything you can do is completely measurable. We seem to be moving back into valuing brand. But the trouble is now we're uncomfortable because it is less measurable. And so that's making life a little more stressful for marketers. Do you think there's that trend happening too? You agree?
Yeah, well, I think, in so many ways, what we've done with measurement and I mean, let's be clear, we've never been good at it.
Yeah.
It's just a very hard, it's just part of the balance of the art and science. Marketing has always been as much art as it is science, just full stop.
Yeah.
And the stressor has always been, well, if we could just measure it more, we can tilt the balance towards science. And no one, and I mean no one, has figured that out yet. And so we get everything from complex multi-attributional sort of, map this to the journey and the figuring out of the weighting of the attribution to the measurement of which ad actually contributed the most to revenue, blah. So it is ultimately the goal of any marketer to just understand as best they can the weather rather than the specifics of microclimates, right? And so and to that end, it doesn't matter how much measurement we add if we don't have common goals and objectives and can measure sort of just progress toward those goals and objectives. It doesn't matter if you've got 100% of your stuff measured down to the nth degree. I always use and I've even done it on the show before. I've used the example of television, right?
Yeah.
Television ratings for, literally until just 2 weeks ago when Nielsen actually killed the in family panel, the way that television ratings work are 2,500 people across the United States, across a 300 million population, 2,500 people told you what was the most popular shows on TV. And we built a multi-billion dollar industry over the top of that. And, so you can't tell me that accuracy in measurement matters. What you have to have is agreement in the goals and objectives and trends and the numbers themselves. And so I think increasingly it's easier to measure everything. And it's also a fallacy that we should be measuring everything.
But the trouble is with that is it's an act of faith then, isn't it? From the C-suite that marketing is working. If you can't show if you can't show those specific goals, well, do you see? And attribution is so flawed, and I wonder if that is what's making things hard right now. Is just because we've kind of trained. Yeah, we've trained everybody that there is this alchemy of creating data and reporting when actually it isn't, and the expectation gap is so wide between. It's
literally the effect of So there's a wonderful, if you just Google around and find it, there's a wonderful case study going around about the last 3 years at Nike. Their new CEO just came in, right? Because the old CEO left, and he was out of consulting. The old CEO was out of consulting, and they basically brought in the consultants to sort of look at the ins and outs of what they were doing from a marketing and product perspective, and make tweaks to all of it, right?
Yeah.
And what they didn't take into account was the magic of all of it, right? In other words, it was each individual campaign, each individual channel, each individual e-commerce thing, each individual conversion rate, each individual. And if you looked at all those things, sure, all of them can be tweaked to be performance-based. But what you lose in the process is a lot of the magic of how those things all work together. And Nike's performance suffered and everybody points to the fact and goes, well, my world is okay. I did better. I was more efficient. I created more efficiency in my process, and I'm 10% less now than I was in last year. Yeah. Why aren't the results better? Well, it's because efficiency is not always the best answer across all those things, because those things work together in a special way. The example I always use is what happened at Content Marketing Institute. Right? We killed our print magazine.
Yeah.
Because we had a really great story that basically said, hey, the print magazine does not great. It's underwater. It doesn't sell ads very well. It costs more to make than it actually draws in revenue. However, the story is that people who read the magazine tend to send more people and are more readily going to come to Content Marketing World. And you could see that in the data. except it was a correlation. You could not prove causation, right?
Yeah.
And so, but what happened was you kill the magazine because it's not doing very well, and you can see the drop that happened in the thing, in the attendance. And so again, you can't directly point to causation other than the correlation, but you go, I can feel it. I know it's that. I know that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you've got places to go, so we've got to draw a line under this. But we could talk about this literally for hours. This is fantastic, and
we could indeed.
Maybe in the future visits, we'll pull on some of these threads that you've picked up here. So when people want to know, is marketing getting any harder, and need that advice, where are they going to find it, mate?
They will find it in our website at seventhbear.com.
Splendid. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They'll find me on LinkedIn and Blue Sky. I'm starting to find my legs on Blue Sky and all of that. So that's where you're going to go see more snarky stuff about Trump and the media and all that bullshit. And then if you want none of that, if you just want to talk about marketing, then LinkedIn is the place to connect.
Splendid. And for me, the most important thing, will you be in the bar next week?
Oh, of course.
I look forward to it, my friend. I'll see you then. So that's a wrap on our visit to the Rose and Rockstar. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Robert for his insight. I have many questions to tackle in the bar, but if you have something top of mind or a thought about what we just discussed, please get in touch. Do that, or if you'd like to know more about me or Robert, the work we do, or any of the resources referred to in the bar, you can find all the links in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com, or connect with us at rockstarcmo on LinkedIn. Please mention that you are a listener. This week, on Wednesday, I'm catching up with Jeff Clark to pull on the thread of how to measure brand in B2B. And as you heard, Robert will be back in the bar on Saturday, so hopefully you'll join us again soon here on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.